Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Drafted Up podcast. Today, we're finishing our fantasy wide receiver rankings as we dive into our wide receiver one. So that is our top 12 wide receivers. Before we dive into that, you can follow us over on Twitter /X at DraftedUp_pod. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, search Drafted Up Podcasts, rate, like, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. We appreciate it. Last week we did our wide receiver 2, so 13 through 24. Today we're finishing that up, like I said. Before we dive into that, the NFL did lose a guy that we touched base on here during our Couch Scout series and through the draft. Rookie corner Kyrie Jackson of the Minnesota Vikings. Him and two former teammates of his in high school, they also played college ball, Isaiah Hazel and Anthony Lighton Jr. They tragically passed away in a car accident. Lighton and Kyrie Jackson were 24, Hazel 23. Suspected drunk driver. Guys, don't drink and drive. Moral of the story.
It's that simple. Just do not drink and drive. You're putting other people's lives at risk. If you're the one that ends up passing, it is what it is. But when you take 3 innocent lives and injure, I think 7 people altogether, it's insane. Never do it. It's not worth it. Just please pay for an Uber or call someone to come pick you up.
There are the other ways that there's public transportation, there's ride sharing, call a friend. There's ways around it that it's unnecessary. You not only affect your own life, you affect others. People lose their children lose their parents, people lose their significant others. The list goes on and on. It's a shame. We didn't touch too much on Kyrie Jackson, but I mean, we did talk about him a bit, and he was drafted by one of our teams, and he had a bright future ahead of him in Minnesota. He really fit the scheme, but that's here nor there. But he had a great story. You can find it. He was about to quit football. He won Employee of the Month at a grocery store, but he stuck to it, and he ended up getting drafted. It's a great story. It's a shame it ended this way, but I did want to touch base on that before we go, because it is part of the podcast. We're not all hunky-dory here and there, doing all fun stuff. Sometimes we got to talk about things that really suck, and that is one of them. Saturday morning, fortunately, Kyrie Jackson, Isaiah Hazel, Anthony Lighton Jr. lost their lives. Thoughts, prayers, positive vibes to all their family, friends, teammates, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Not exactly something I wanted to open the podcast with, but
Gotta happen, though.
Yeah, I figured easier to open with that and then just dive into what we were talking about here instead of just pushing it off to the end. But moral of the story, guys, don't drink and drive. There's alternate ways you can do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Don't put other lives at risk. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Like I said, we're diving into our wide receiver ones today. So wide receivers 12 through 1 for our consensus rankings. Quick run through our wide receiver 2s last week. 24, we had Michael Pittman Jr. 23, we had DJ Moore. 22, Malik Neighbors. 21, Cooper Kupp. 20, DK Metcalf. 19, Deebo Samuel. 18, George Pickens. 17, Jalen Waddle. 16, Devontae Adams. 15, Brandon Ayuk. Devonta Smith at 14, and at 13, Mike Evans. So let's go right in. Wide receiver 12, rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. We've talked him up a ton here on the podcast through the whole draft cycle, scout stuff, dynasty stuff. So you guys have heard us talk up Marvin Harrison Jr. I have him a lot higher than Nick. I have him at wide receiver 10. Nick has him at wide receiver 18, putting him at our wide receiver 12.
Yeah, I've talked about Marv on the podcast, comparing him to Devontae Adams, because they're the two guys going ADP wise very, very close, back to back in most mocks. I would rather just a guy that I know proven has what he done, but don't get me wrong on what I'm saying here. Marv's an elite talent as a rookie. He's gonna be good. It's just that right now I don't feel comfortable enough pushing my chips into a guy that's never played an NFL down as almost a first-round pick in fantasy. He is almost going in the back end of the first. He's going very early second. So as my receiver 1, I really wouldn't be comfortable with him. If you could get a guy on the swing like Cooper Kupp in the 4th, it changes the story a little bit, but the board doesn't always fall that way. I like to have a guy that's settled in as a 1, which will be Marv next year. Marv will be a top 8 receiver going next year in fantasy football. It's just that I don't know where he's going to finish this year to be drafting him at what could be his ceiling this year.
Yeah, it is an unknown, and like you said, you are almost drafting him at his ceiling because you don't know what his
Yeah.
ceiling entails or his floor
Mm.
because he's never played it down. So like usually a lot of rookie receivers, you see them fall into where we had Malik Neighbors into that 20 range. They fall into the middle third, fourth round. Then that's where you see taking a risk. Marvin Harrison, he's been hyped up for years, and it's showing. It's continuing on now into the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy cycle where he is being drafted almost as a wide receiver one, if not he is. I'm not sure what his current ADP is in terms of receivers, but I know he's going back end of the first to the middle of the second. I'm higher on him in terms of just redraft value. I have him at 10. I think there's a good chance that he could break all of Puka Nakua's rookie records. That's 1,400 yards, 100 plus catches. I don't know what the rookie touchdown record is, but I don't see him getting too many touchdowns. But I think there is a decent chance that Marvin Harrison gets 100 catches, gets 1,400 yards. And that's going to put him into this range of a top wide receiver.
Of wide receiver ones, yeah. He's currently being drafted on Sleeper as wide receiver 9.
Okay, so we're actually lower on
easily
him.
a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. His ADP's 2.02, so it's the second pick of the second round, so he's going very early. But that is definitely a possibility where Marv goes off for 115 catches, 1,400 yards, and 10 touchdowns, because he's really the only option in Arizona receiver-wise.
Mm-hmm.
You do have Trey McBride as the tight end, and then James Conner's going to get his work, and Trey Benson coming in as well from Florida State. He's going to get his touches too. But other than those three guys, Marv's really the only guy getting receptions, Trey McBride. So,
Zay Jones, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, they're probably not threats to eat into Marvin Harrison's target load. Trey McBride certainly is. He's a top 5 tight end most likely for fantasy football. But Kyler Murray, like Marv has the benefit of being a rookie receiver who has a really good quarterback. Kyler Murray has produced a wide receiver once before. Like his stretch with Hollywood Brown when DeAndre Hopkins was out, Hollywood Brown was at a wide receiver 1 rate. DeAndre Hopkins was a wide receiver 1 for multiple years in fantasy with Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray can sustain a wide receiver 1, and I just think that's what happens. I think it's going to be a slow start. I do, and I think people are going to be like, man, I can't believe I used a late first or mid-second round pick on this guy. But I think after maybe like 4 weeks, I think Marv's going to just take over there in Arizona, and we're going to see a guy who could win people championships who take that risk on him in the first or second round.
Yeah, I almost see it. Sorry. I almost see it the opposite. I think Marv's going to come out hot as hell out the gate, being the only really, he's not even proven, but being the only real dominant one alpha receiver in Arizona. I think Kyler, the first couple weeks, is really going to be looking his ways. And just to show that the draft capital was worth it in real life and in fantasy, the Cardinals are going to have to get Marv used heavily right off the bat. But then I think in the upcoming weeks, I think Kyler's going to start using Dortch more because when Greg Dortch is on the field, he gets used. Michael Wilson, the rookie from Stanford last year, so he's coming back with experience this year. I think he's going to be a good option. You mentioned Zay
Jones.
Zay Jones, that's his name. I was going to call him Zay Flowers, and I'm like, that's not that guy's in real life. That is.
Yeah, so you have him at 18. So where would you be willing to draft Marvin Harrison? Say he does fall.
The third.
So that's where you're first starting to be comfortable with him?
I would be very comfortable around where Jalen Waddle's ADP is. It's the late third, early fourth.
You do have them similarly ranked.
Yeah, I have Waddle them very close. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be a very good ADP. If I can get him in like the back end of the third, I would happily take Marv. But taking him as my second option in fantasy is it's a little worrisome for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also like to start running back, so he would essentially be your first receiver. But
yeah.
I'm comfortable doing like I said before. Like I love targeting receivers early and try to go hero RB or zero RB. So like if I look for a guy in the first round, I'm very comfortable with Marv in the second. I'd even consider him in the first, depending on how the running back board fell and receiving board. But yeah, I have wide receiver 10, you have him 18, putting him as our final wide receiver 12. Moving on to wide receiver 11. That would be Houston Texans' Nico Collins. You have him as wide receiver 15. I'm a little higher. I have him at 12. Last season in 15 games, Nico had 80 receptions on 109 targets, 1,297 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That was 17.4 points per game in PPR, and he finished as wide receiver 12. So We have a guy here who had his breakout season last year.
Mm-hmm.
He finished as a wide receiver 1 while missing 2 games. Had a rookie quarterback, so like rookie quarterbacks historically don't provide wide receiver 12s unless, or wide receiver 12, top 1 receivers unless like that receiver is more of an elite level talent. And I think Nico Collins possesses those abilities. I have him as a wide receiver 1. You're just outside there. Houston did bring in more weapons. Tank Dell's going to be healthy. They brought in Joe Mixon. They brought in Steph Diggs. So that could cut into Nico's range of outcomes. But 109 targets last year in 15 games, like I still think he's going to get well over 100 targets and sustain similar numbers. The 80 catches, almost 1,300 yards. So like I see it that he ends up finishing again as wide receiver 12. I think he's the alpha in Houston. I don't think getting Diggs and getting Dell healthy is going to harm Nico too much. I think that conversation more affects, do you think it's Steph Diggs or do you think it's Tank Dell? I think Nico is the safe option there.
I also think Nico's safe, but I would almost say Tank Dell is also safe. Just based off of how much Stroud loves Tank Dell, and you've seen the connection instantly right off the bat between the two rookies last year. I have Nico as wide receiver 15 with a very similar season as last year, 82 catches, 1,227 yards, and 7 touchdowns. It's just that I think with Steph Diggs coming in, it's going to take, I have him at 129 targets, Nico, so it's 20 more targets than last year. But I think Diggs coming in is going to take some of that. I think Tank Dell is going to hopefully be healthy all season. I want nothing more than Tank Dell just to play all the games. Joe Mixon's going to get a lot more work than Devin Singletary did last year. So I see Nico having a very similar season to last year, and I have him just falling a little bit to 15. But I do like Nico a lot this year. I like him and Tank Dell tremendously.
Yeah.
Steph Diggs' ADP is way too high for me.
So yeah, Diggs is such a tough one. It really just comes down to like, do you believe that the end of last year is now Steph Diggs' baseline? Whereas before Joe Brady took over play calling for the offense in Buffalo, Diggs was going, I have his points here, 26.2, 13.6, 19.1, 36, 24, 20, 17, 16, 22.6. And then Joe Brady took over, and it was 6, 6, 19, 6, 8, 7, 7.
And that's full PPR, correct?
Yes, this is full PPR.
So you're looking at essentially 3 to 4 catches a game for 30 to 40 yards.
Yeah.
Which is not even worth rostering at that point. That's nothing in PPR.
Like, it's so tough to tell, like, because he had it. The first 9 games of the year, Diggs was over 15 points every game.
Yeah, it is the tale of two seasons for Steph Diggs.
Yeah, so it's whether Diggs really comes into what do you believe Steph Diggs is now. Like, I'm a little lower on him than ADP, but like I still sort of buy in that Diggs becomes a value, because I think in a lot of home leagues, Steph Diggs is gonna fall, because I think everyone's gonna be like, oh, that guy was cheeks last year at the end of the year. I think that's
especially the people that had him. Yeah, I'm not going to go through that again.
Yeah. So I do believe Steph Diggs becomes a value eventually. I know his current ADP is getting him in like the 3rd round, but I think in a lot of home leagues, Diggs is going to fall into the 5th, 6th round range, and I am comfortable taking that shot then.
100%. I personally would want him after Tank Dell, though. I would hate the situation that he's in. I hate that he has to play with Nico and Tank and a rookie quarterback last year. So I think Stroud's going to take a little bit of a stumble back this season. It's not going to be a whole bunch, but to do what he did last year is almost impossible. So I'm looking at it as like the Mahomes effect. He stumbled his second year, but was still fine. And he's got a lot of mouths to feed in Houston. There's a lot of work to go around. I think someone's going to end up taking a hit. I just personally don't know who it's going to be yet.
Yeah, so it becomes tough because like it's finding out which ones like are gonna be set. Like, there's a chance like you're drafting all these guys at their ceilings potentially, but there's also a possibility where one of those guys just falls out of favor and you see 2 guys rise up. So like it's really tough, and it's gonna be a lot of just taking your shot on who you believe are gonna be the guys. I personally have them Nico, Tank, Diggs, But I've seen people think that Diggs is going to be the option because he's a true alpha receiver. He demands targets. And I understand that. I personally don't want to go that route. I think that's a way riskier route. But who knows? Who knows? Like, it's going to be tough that all three of them you're drafting at their floors, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That there's really not a world for that. Yeah.
If I had to pick one of them, I'm personally taking Tank Dell. I have Nico ranked higher. I think Tank Dell's safer. I think he's going to be an elite flex play this season, wide receiver 2 option sometimes. He's going to be a big play guy in Houston, and I think he's going to have another really good season. Yeah, I'm very happy I was able to predict that rookie season last year. Very, very happy.
I had Tank Dell just right outside my top 24. I had him at 27, and he was only like a point away from being a wide receiver 2. I do think Tank Dell is also a really safe option, especially in the 5th round where he seems to be going right now.
Yeah.
Next up, wide receiver 10. This one's got a little diversity to it. And that's Drake London from the Atlanta Falcons. You have him as wide receiver 9. I have him as wide receiver 16. Last season in 16 games, London put up 69 receptions on 110 targets, 905 yards, 2 touchdowns. That was 10.9 points per game, finishing as wide receiver 36. So here's my problem with Drake London. I feel like you're drafting him at his ceiling.
You are. You're drafting him over his ceiling, arguably.
Yeah, he never had 1,000 yards in a season, and so now he's bringing in a upgraded quarterback for sure. Kirk Cousins way better than Desmond Ridder, but this quarterback, Kirk Cousins, a little older, 36, coming off an Achilles injury, with a guy who's never had 1,000 yards. Whereas, like, why aren't we boosting George Pickens, who's had 1,000 yards before last season? In last season, had 1,100 yards with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. And he got an upgrade. I get it. You don't want to admit Russell Wilson's an upgrade at the quarterback position, but he is way better than what the Steelers were fielding the last 2 years for George Pickens. But George Pickens seems to be drafted at his floor now. Like, he's not getting that bump that Drake London is from getting an upgrade at quarterback. Like, London does pass the eye test. He's looked great. And new system, offense, they're going to pass the ball more. So, like, I get it. I just don't like drafting him at middle 2nd round on a guy who's never put that up. I have Marv high, but, like, I think Marv is in his own world as a prospect. I don't think Drake London was in that realm. I get they were both top 10 picks, but I just have a lot of questions, and especially because, like, there's also more mouths to feed. Bijan's there. Kyle Pitts is there. They brought in Darnell Mooney at request of Kirk Cousins. They traded for Rondale Moore. Like, and I don't know. I don't know if Kirk Cousins stays healthy. I trust Michael Penix coming in as well, but Penix he loves spreading it around. I don't know. I just don't like Drake London. If Drake London was around later into the 3rd, I'm way more comfortable taking him there.
Yeah, he's definitely your Marv. I've had the eye test with Drake London where I haven't had with Marv on the NFL field. I know Drake London is talented. I know he was worth the 8th pick when Atlanta picked him coming out of USC. Some people had him ranked higher than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave when they all came out together. No one had George Pickens ranked higher than them. And I love George Pickens. I have him as my 13th ranked receiver this year. Yep. There's a reason George Pickens was not with those 3 guys in that draft class. He went in the 2nd round, to where these guys all almost went top 10. They're all elite talents. With Kirk Cousins coming in, I think he's going to see a target share is going to go crazy up for Drake London. It's more so I have him projected at 9 touchdowns. I only have 2 or 3 people projected at 9 touchdowns, and it's CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Drake London.
Like, not Mike Evans?
No, I have Evans at 8. But I just see Drake London as he's going to be the guy for Kirk, which Jefferson was. He's not going to have a Jefferson-type season. Obviously, he's not that talented. I have him going off for 94 catches, almost 1,300 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So it's almost similar to the Nico year I had, with a little more catches and 2 or 3 more touchdowns. But Drake London, though, he's a dog, dude. He's someone I'm comfortable pushing chips in. Not all, but at least some, because I've seen what he's done the last 2 years with horrendous quarterbacks. And I get the George Pickens thing. George Pickens is a different type of receiver, though. So, of course, he had 1,000 yards on he's Deshaun. He's nothing but big plays. And I love that. I love that for fantasy. You need that in some weeks.
Yeah,
but I think Drake London is
63 catches for 100.
It's insane, yeah. But I think Drake London's going to be like a really consistent borderline number one receiver this year, where he's getting a ton of targets every game. And that's really what you want. If you're getting 15 targets a game, you're pulling in 8 to 9 of them. So
the Atlanta guys are tough to tell because, like, they all pass the eye test. Kyle Pitts and him.
I'm in on all 3 of them.
Like,
if I can get Bijan, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, I'll happily walk out with 3 Atlanta Falcons in this draft.
It's a matter of a touchdown increase for all of them. Like Drake London, 4 touchdowns his rookie year, 2 last year. Kyle Pitts, it was 1, 2, 3 his 3 years in the league. So, like, they need more touchdowns. And if they do sustain 8 touchdowns, they do fall into this range. So it's just a matter of, like, do you see Drake London scoring more touchdowns? The Falcons offense should score more touchdowns. They're better than they were. I'm weary of his current position. I do like Drake London. Like, he's just, like I said, I have him at 16, but, like, if he catches 3 more passes, he almost moves into my top 12. So I just think all these guys are really clumped in the same tier together. It's just a matter of, does Drake London put it together? The 3rd year is the year where you see receivers hit their ceiling. So this will be a big year for Drake London. I do think he'll be fine. I do think he's going to finally break 1,000 yards. I think he's going to have a career high in targets, which he would just need 120. He should get that. Career high in touchdowns, he only needs 5. Like, I do think he hits all those marks.
I agree.
It's just a matter of, like, I just don't like where he's going.
Understandable. He's going pretty early. But if you believe that he should have been like a top 10 pick 2 years ago coming out of college, nothing's changed. You've seen that he's talented. He's had Desmond Ridder throwing him the ball, and there's a reason that guy's not even on the Falcons anymore. The new coaching came in, and they're like, well, this guy's dog water. We need to get him out of here. And they brought in 2 great quarterbacks. So even if Kirk goes down, I'm 100% confident Penix's coming in, and him and Drake London are going to look identical to him and Roma Doomsday last year at Washington. And it's going to be glorious.
I personally had London as my wide receiver 3 in his rookie class.
I had him 2, behind Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. I had Olave 1. Yeah.
Understandable.
Wilson 2. All right. Moving on to the segue, there is Chris Olave, our wide receiver 9, New Orleans Saints receiver. I have him at 9. You have him at 10. Last season, he played 16 games, 87 receptions on 138 targets, 1,123 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That was 14.5 points per game. Wide receiver 16. Chris Olave's problem is a touchdown issue. Again, like, he's got the yards and the catches, especially in PPR. He does have a slight quarterback issue. Derek Carr's a good quarterback. He's a mid quarterback, but he's produced wide receiver 1s before. He did it with Devontae Adams. Hunter Renfrow, I think, had a wide receiver 1 year with Derek Carr. Derek Carr just loves Rashid Shaheed. He just loves just fucking chucking it to him. And, like, Olave, I remember there was, like, games where, like, he had near touchdowns almost, like, every game, I feel. And, like, it was either his 1 foot wasn't in or Derek Carr slightly overthrew him. Like, this is a guy who's 2 years in the league. He's had 1,000 yards every year. His career high in touchdowns is 5, so you'd like to see that go up a little bit. But the yards and the targets and the receptions have been there every season. Like, he's a proven receiver, and I think he gets slept on. Like, a lot of people don't talk about that. Like, Chris Olave, to me, is a true alpha receiver.
To certain extents, yeah, I agree to that. But I don't see him like I see Drake London or Garrett Wilson. I do see him as a 1 receiver. It's just that I don't really see him as like a true alpha. I think he's the guy that's going to produce great numbers. Especially this year, they're going to be moving guys around in motion more. They were 32nd as the last in guys in motion last year. And then when Chris Olave was in motion last year, he was a wide receiver 4, I think. He was like the 4th best receiver in yards per route and fantasy. All of them mumbo jumbo. So I'm very excited to see what New Orleans can do when they actually put this guy in motion and use him to what needs to be done. Because I think he's going to be a great option. I kept trying to target him last year in our main league. I was sending trade offers pretty much weekly to the guy that had him, and he never bit. Which in the long run, I'm kind of glad he did, because Chris Olave ended up underperforming last year to where I had him. I expected him to be an almost top 5 receiver last year. So this year, I just kind of lowered those numbers a little bit. I still have him as top 10 receiver, but just right at the outside, right at 10.
Yeah, his numbers really consistent across the board. 19.2, 14.6, 18.4, 1, 9.2, 16.6, 12.6, 9.6, 16.6, 21.4, 18.4, 16.9, 12.8, 23.3, 5.6 in the championship week.
Yeah, so, don't get me wrong. He was still a very good option last year. I looked at him last year as a top 5 guy, so I was pushing hard to get him. And unfortunately, he didn't finish there. Some guys don't hit their ceiling like that, but I think this year Chris Olave is going to have a good year.
I see Chris Olave as like an alpha, like I do like a Keenan Allen. Like he doesn't look like a true alpha, but like he gets a ton of targets, brings in like it's just consistent numbers across the board. Like it doesn't look like an alpha because it's not like he's big dogging you every play, like Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson. Like I see him in an alpha range like Amon-Ra St. Brown, where he's just move the chains guy. Like you can count on him to bring in targets and get you down the field.
Whoa. Amon-Ra. That's a little blow to Amon-Ra, brother. He's right up there with Tyreek and CD and Jefferson.
But he doesn't big dog you. He moves you down the field. Like you could just throw to him every play and he gets your yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He's not a guy who you can just like huck it to down the field. Like that's not Amon-Ra's game. He's a chain mover.
Yeah, I'm still fine with that, though. I would still put Amon-Ra with those other guys.
Oh, yeah, he's the elite version.
Because CD does the same thing. CD's getting check downs. He's getting behind the line work. But then he's also getting... Well, yeah.
I think an Amon-Ra type season could be possible for Chris Olave. 100 catches, 1,200 yards, 6 to 7 touchdowns.
Amon-Ra's getting 120 catches, brother. He's a PPR.
Okay. Again, he's the elite version of this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I don't think Olave's that good. I think he's like the Wish version of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
But those put up fantasy numbers.
100%. Yeah. I have him at 10 for a reason.
Like 2022 Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's what I'm looking at. 106 catches, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think Olave gets a little more yards, less catches. But I think that is the realm for him. Which
I agree. I have him at 98 and almost 13. But yeah, I think they're in different tiers though.
Yeah. You'll see Amon-Ra is well later in our list here. Does Derek Carr worry you at all for Chris Olave?
No, I'm actually a Derek Carr supporter. I've been for probably the last 8 years. Yeah, he's a terrible fantasy quarterback, but he's a very good streaming option if you're really down bad for a quarterback. If he's getting the good matchup, he's going to go out there and put up decent numbers. He's not going to win you weeks, but he knows how to spread the ball. He's a very good NFL quarterback. He's going to get these guys targets. And yeah, sometimes they're not going to go to Olave. Sometimes they're going to go to Rashid Ali.
He loves Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah, and then Alvin Kamara could easily end up with games with 12-plus catches like he does. And then you got Kendrick Miller coming. I even think Jamal Williams is still there, which is insane to me. That guy's probably going to be a cap cut. I agree. Yeah. But if a team looks at him as a red zone option, that's taking touchdowns. It's all how a team looks at a guy. It's a new coaching staff with Williams there. He was out 2 years ago. He had like 20 touchdowns. So obviously it's still a pathway. In my eyes, it's not. But if New Orleans loves him as the goal line back with Kamara and Kendrick Miller, who are not bruisers or line movers, sure. Taysom Hill's probably going to end up having to play tight end if Juwan Johnson's hurt. So yeah,
the Saints are a tough one to kind of figure out. Yeah. It's a new system, so I'll be interested to seeing how they line up in camp and seeing how they start to utilize these guys, because there are lower end mouths to feed. Like Rashid Shaheed, he's a late round pick. Throw the belt him. Yep. Juwan Johnson or Taysom Hill, they're good streaming tight end options. Taysom Hill especially could have a real big boom week. He's done it before. Michael Thomas isn't there anymore, so that opens up some targets that I think would end up moving Olave's way. We'll see. I think Olave just does need more touchdowns to be into this range, and I do project that out. I think I had him at 7 touchdowns this year, which would be in that range that you want your wide receiver ones getting.
I agree. Also, side note, Taysom Hill in a lot of mocks is going pretty much undrafted. In a lot of home leagues, that's not going to happen. Just based off of Taysom Hill and people with like lower, less fantasy knowledge, just knowing who Taysom Hill is, kind of, they're like, oh, that guy kind of plays quarterback and runs the ball and he does kind of everything. I kind of see Taysom Hill getting drafted in most home leagues. He's borderline undrafted.
I would target Taysom Hill with your last pick if you, especially if you punt the tight end or you take like T.J. Hawkinson, who might start the year on PUP. Get Taysom Hill. He's good for a stream week here and there. Like he's going to get volume. Like the Saints are going to utilize him, just not necessarily as a tight end. So we'll see. Taysom Hill's one of the hardest guys to project though. Like
it's so hard.
He's tough. Moving on. Rookie sensation last year is our wide receiver 8. That's Puka Nacua, the Los Angeles Rams. We both had him as our wide receiver 8. In 17 games, Puka put up 105 catches on 160 targets, 1,486 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That was 17.6 points per game, and he finished as the wide receiver 4. So we haven't taken a step back this year, but we project Cooper Kupp to be healthy, so that's going to cut into some of those targets. But we both think that Puka Nacua has taken over the alpha role for this offense for Matt Stafford and Sean McVay.
I didn't want to. For like the last 3 weeks, I'm like, Cooper Kupp's a safer option. It's the whole rookie thing. I know what I'm getting with Cooper Kupp. Puka, you don't really know. But you cannot. What he did last year was unmatched. He had like 1,500 yards, an ungodly amount of catches. Stafford knows how to get people the ball, so I'm not even worried about Cooper Kupp taking a huge step back. I still have him as I have him 19, tied with Jalen Waddle. So I had to give Puka I had to give him his flowers, dude. What he did last year, I don't see why he can't do it again. Even with a healthy Cooper Kupp, I think that makes it even scarier in some options to where who are you going to cover? You can't double both. You can't double the Puka. Kupp's going to be open. You double Kupp, Puka's going to be open. Hey, man, the Rams are going to be fun again. I love Stafford and the Rams just winging the ball. I'm glad Stafford's finally getting the option to actually go down there and throw to good receivers to where he was stuck in Detroit with just Calvin Johnson, and that was it.
Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, and that was it, dude. They gave him Brandon Pettigrew at the tight end spot, and it just all failed miserably, dude. Sure, here's Brandon Pettigrew and Javad Best, and have fun, brother. That failed miserably. But I do like Puka a lot this year. I haven't taken a step back because what he did last year was almost unheard of. It literally was. His rookie stats were groundbreaking. Yeah.
I can't see him hitting the 160 targets this year. I think that's going to go down. I had it at 147, so that's not too much. So his receptions do take a step back. I think he's good for 1,200 yards. I think that's his floor. Same amount of touchdowns, I think 5 to 6 touchdowns a year. Like he's a good PPR option. I think he's going to approach 100 catches. He's going to get his yards. The Rams do love to move the ball around. I think he's a really safe option. You're getting him at the back end of the first round. Sometimes he does fall into the second. Like I think Puka in that range is a perfectly safe pick. You know what you're getting. I don't think there's a lot of harm to taking Puka Nacua. You're getting a steady option. I'm not worried about a sophomore slump for him. I think he has established himself as like a really great route runner. He knows how to get open. He finds the middle of the field. I think him and Kupp are going to do some damage together, especially if they're both healthy. And I think that's going to really help Matt Stafford and move that offense around with Kyron Williams. The Rams offense, they're like a lower, like if you can't get, like we've brought up, getting pieces in those elite offenses, those Miamis, those San Franciscos, Kansas City, Cincinnati, I think the Rams almost fall into that range as well. Like you want pieces of a Sean McVay offense.
Yeah, those 3 guys are going in the top 4 rounds for a reason, being Williams, Puka, and Kupp. It's the Rams offense. They're going to score. They're going to get a lot of points. It's a good offense for sure. It's right there with Houston, Miami, all those good. Now, here's a question for you, though. Puka's last season obviously was groundbreaking, and you only see him going as wide receiver like 8 to 9, sometimes past Marv. If Marv goes out and has the identical season that Puka has this year or last year, so he goes out there and ties the rookie records, there's a good chance that Marv is a top 3 pick in fantasy football next year.
I think that falls into draft capital. Puka was a 5th round pick.
I agree, and that's crazy how you can see the difference in Puka was the 5th round pick. Oh, the draft capital's not there. But what's the difference?
I also think a lot of it is options around him. Like Cooper Kupp's there. Cooper Kupp is way better than anything else Arizona has.
Oh, I agree.
To combat Marv. And then Kyron Williams is way better than James Conner. Like, I think it just falls into more pieces in Los Angeles than Arizona, whereas like Marv is the dude in the receiving crew. And Trey McBride, he's better than Cooper Kupp in terms of fantasy value, in terms of where he stacks at his position. But they're going around the same range. James Conner, you're going to take Kyron Williams. Cooper Kupp is better than Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, all those guys. Trey McBride obviously wins tight end in terms of the Los Angeles offense. Tyler Higbee and Colby Parkinson aren't putting up Trey McBride numbers. But, and I just think the aging quarterback as well plays a part in that. Like, Matt Stafford's getting older. Will he be there next year? Like, he's a guy we got to start having that conversation. Like, is he going to hit that decline eventually? Kyler's still young. He's still producing at a high rate. Like, I think that's what boosts. And then, of course, draft capital. Marvin Harrison was a top 5 pick. Puka Nacua went in the 5th round.
See, the way I'm looking at Stafford is if Joe Flacco can go out there at almost 40 and wing that ball, that's just what Stafford does. It's that weird offense where you just stand in the pocket and wing the ball. There's a stance Stafford's playing for another 5 years if he's doing this. He doesn't need to be mobile. He just takes hits, and God forbid his body keeps up. I hope it does. I love Stafford.
Joe Flacco didn't have a lot of injury concern. Matt Stafford gets banged up pretty often, but
yeah, I agree.
I do see where you're coming from in terms of like if Marv does this, he's going to be way higher.
He's going to be way higher than what Puka is right now. Yeah, it's not even going to be close. We're going to be talking about Marv next year with like CD, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, depending on the year Jefferson has. I also think Chase can come back into that category. I think this year's Chase is bounce back.
I have Chase in that category.
Oh, no, I agree. Right. But
next up is a guy who could also join that category. Our wide receiver 7, we both had him there, and that is the New York Jets' Garrett Wilson. Last season, Wilson had played all 17 games. He had 95 receptions on 168 targets. Barely broke 1,000 yards at 1,042, 3 touchdowns. That was 12.5 points per game. Finished as wide receiver 26. We had this conversation with Drake London. Got an upgraded quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, if he's healthy, Garrett Wilson should see an uptick in production. But even with the shitty quarterbacks, Garrett Wilson has produced. He's had 1,000 yards both seasons of his career. Mm-hmm. He's got like the record for most targets through 2 years.
Yes, sir.
Like 168 targets is insane for a second-year player. Like they just weren't necessarily great targets, like 3 touchdowns, barely 1,000 yards on those 95 catches. Who's to say he doesn't this year? Say he gets close to 168 targets and Aaron Rodgers is healthy. We can see 100 catches, 1,300 yards, and like 8 to 10 touchdowns. And Garrett Wilson, you're looking at maybe a wide receiver 2 overall.
Yeah, the way he gets targets and with the way Rodgers does screen work, deep routes, and mid, there's a chance that Garrett Wilson leads the league in catches. There's a chance he has 140 catches on 170 targets, just based off of 10-yard routes, cutbacks, Rodgers knowing what to do with elite receivers. I'm looking at this season as a very Davante Adams-esque season. With Rodgers, I have him at 117 catches, 1,400 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Yeah, so everything's on the up and up. I don't see how Garrett Wilson fails. He's out there with Zach Wilson last year putting up numbers, and they're not great. They're flex, but Zach Wilson's arguably the worst starting quarterback in football last year. And now he gets Aaron Rodgers, who I'm not going to come here and tell you is still Aaron Rodgers of 8 years ago. But Aaron Rodgers is still a very, very good quarterback. He's coming off an injury, so we're going to have to see how that works. But as long as those targets are still there, all of them are going to be better targets than last year. So the catches are going to go up, the yards are going to go up, and the touchdowns. So I don't see how Garrett Wilson isn't a wide receiver 1, or even just right on the cusp. I think he's got a pretty much safe lock this year. And then the Jets also did bring in Tyrod Taylor, who is a huge injury concern if Rodgers ends up going down. But I think Tyrod's a very good backup quarterback. He knows how to get guys the ball. Every time he steps on the field, he produces. It's just he can't stay healthy. So we'll see what happens in New York, but I do like Garrett Wilson a lot this year.
They also brought in an option for Garrett Wilson as well in terms of like Mike Williams. They have a true number 2 receiver to pair with Garrett Wilson.
And last year they brought in opposite. And I love the
Lazard, way that guy ain't it.
No.
But Aaron Rodgers last year with Davante Adams, 2021, Davante Adams had 169 targets, 123 receptions, 1,553 yards, 11 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, huge stat range.
Touchdowns are going to be like that. Don't get me.
No.
Davante Adams is a touchdown freak.
Yeah. And the year before that with Rodgers, he had 149 targets, 115 catches, 1,300 yards, 18 touchdowns. Like,
good God, dude.
Yeah. Like, if you can get half, like, I look at, like, the 2018 season, even then he had 13 touchdowns. Like,
you're not going to get the touchdowns. No.
you're going to get like 8.
Yeah,
8 touchdowns,
eight's probably the
1,300
ceiling.
yards, 100 plus catches for Garrett Wilson. And that's going to put him in the range as a top 5 fantasy option at the wide receiver position. That's a realm of possibility. Like, I think you're almost drafting Garrett Wilson at his floor. He's going the back end of the first, early second, similar range as Marvin Harrison.
I agree.
So he's going as like wide receiver 7 or 8. I think that's where he ultimately almost ends up. He might end up as like wide receiver 10 or wide receiver 5. Like, I think he ends up in that range. Like, I think where you're drafting Garrett Wilson is essentially where Garrett Wilson finishes. I don't see him finishing outside the top 10, but I don't see him like creeping into the top 3. But I think he has more of a better chance of finishing top 3 than he does outside the top 12.
That's what it is. I think his window is very small. I think it's a wide receiver 5 to 8, and you're drafting him at wide receiver 8. You're getting him with the last pick in the first. But I think he has a chance to break through that window to go above. It's not down, it's up. And those are the kind of guys you want. And I can't see him falling past 10. I don't see him being outside of the top receivers. But then I could see him being above A.J. Brown or Puka or Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I could see him somehow finishing as a top 5 receiver. But Garrett Wilson's a guy I'm targeting heavily in best ball, redraft dynasty league.
Yep.
He's the guy to get.
Super safe at this point.
Yeah.
And again, like I've brought up, third year is usually the year you see receivers hit their ceiling. Garrett Wilson, the last 2 years, over 1,000 yards, over 90 catches. Like, the guy brings in passes. He is an alpha. He's a true one. And Aaron Rodgers loves that kind of receiver. He focuses on his true number 1 receivers, and that's Garrett Wilson. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy this year, I wouldn't even worry about Garrett Wilson. I'd worry about him a little more if Aaron Rodgers does get hurt and it's Tyrod Taylor. Then I think he falls outside the top 12. But I don't
think it's by much, though. I don't think it's like last year where he was wide receiver 27.
26. No. I think he'll still be within the top 20. I think his floor then would be like wide receiver 19.
Yeah, I agree. How good was that wide receiver draft class, dude? Chris Olave,
incredible.
Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens, dude. We talked about all of these guys, and it's crazy. It's awesome. I love seeing it. It's like guys growing up that watched receivers play, and now we're really seeing like the influx that receivers had, like Chad Johnson, Steve Smith, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Andre Johnson, guys like that on kids growing up that they want to grow up to be receivers, and now we're getting kids like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Marv as a rookie, dude. It's crazy, dude. I love all the receivers in football are so good, dude.
It's now becoming a priority position as well, whereas before it was like receivers aren't priority, like you can plug and chug, like receivers are getting paid. Like, they're being looked at as an impact position now. Like, you didn't always see receivers going drafted top 10. You found them middle to, like, Justin Jefferson went 21 in his rookie class. So, like, receivers are now being incredibly valued. Like, they're game changers. Like, you need true receivers, elite talent there to succeed, unless you have like Pat Mahomes and he's just doing this with guys. But they got Travis Kelce. Moving on, wide receiver 6, Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals. We both have him at 6. Last season, Chase played 16 games, a lot of those without Joe Burrow. 100 receptions on 145 targets, 1,216 yards, 17 touchdowns. That was 16.4 points per game. He finished as wide receiver 11. Jamar Chase has wide receiver 1, like overall 1.
Yeah, for sure.
He's that good of a talent. He demands targets. He's obviously buds with Joe Burrow. And like I think Jamar Chase has a similar year closer to his rookie season than he does the last 2 years. Jamar Chase's rookie year, he had 81 catches for 1,455 yards and 13 touchdowns.
I agree.
I think that is what we're looking at with Jamar Chase this year.
I don't know what it was about last year, but I found myself not in on Jamar Chase as much as I wanted to be. That is not the case this year. I'm all back in on Jamar Chase. The T. Higgins isn't really a threat. I do like Jermaine Burton being there now. I think he's way better than Tyler Boyd.
Hater.
I have T. Higgins having a better year than you do, so I don't want to hear it. I really do like Jamar Chase, though. I think he has the true ability to be the best receiver in football this year for a fantasy option. I think Burrow's going to come out swinging, defending last year. The last year was a fluke. I think the Bengals are going to be a legitimate contender this year. I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get Chase. I'm trying to get Burrow. I'm even trying to target Higgins sometimes if I can get the right option.
I love Higgins' value right now. He's going 5th round. I think you're drafting him as floor.
I agree. And then I also don't see why Jermaine Burton's not being drafted. Tyler Boyd was always drafted in the back end of fantasy drafts. Jermaine Burton is more talented than Tyler Boyd. The offense now doesn't have Joe Mixon. So you're going to have less rushing stats with Zach Moss and Chase Brown there. Jermaine Burton could possibly be a legitimate fantasy option as like a flex guy, a good bench guy. Snag him with your last pick in the draft. You'll see how it goes week 1. And if he doesn't hit, cut him. It's that simple.
Yeah, but Jermaine Burton's worth looking at the end there.
Yeah, you don't want to be.
Chase. This is one of those teams where you want the pieces of that offense. Like it's a team, especially if Joe Burrow's healthy. Joe Burrow's healthy. He's a guy who can push 5,000 yards. He's one of those outlier pocket quarterbacks who has fantasy value because he doesn't move around a lot, but he can put up close to 5,000 yards. He can contribute to receivers who push 1,000 yards. One of them, which could get close to 1,500 in Jamar Chase, and a huge Jamar Chase's career low in touchdowns is 7. And that's the mark I want my wide receivers to get. That's where I want their touchdown floor to be is 7. Yeah. And Jamar Chase, I think he's gonna get over that.
He's going to get 7 at least for sure. Yeah, he's going to get above that. I think I have him at 8. Yeah, but he finished with 12, 13.
13 is rookie year, 9 is second year, 7 last year.
Yeah, his window is 8 to 12 this year,
and I even think if Burrow gets hurt, he's fine. Jake Browning looked good last year. He was effective in the Cincinnati offense. I think he will not hurt Jamar Chase's value. I think he affects more the other options.
I think he affects everybody else and the actual Cincinnati Bengals. But Jamar Chase would still eat up targets. They're not going to be elite targets. His touchdowns would fall if Browning's there. But his catches are going to maybe even go up because he's going to see an influx in targets because backup quarterbacks tend to target their one option. They look at their one guy and they just pepper them the ball. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance that Chase's targets would even go up with the backup quarterback. It's just that the touchdown targets wouldn't be as good. But I'm all in on Chase this year. I think he's going to have in my eyes, the bounce back season. He still had a good season. But I think he's going to come back to being a top 2-3 fantasy receiver possibly.
Yeah. And he's going mid to late first. He's worth snagging up there. I have no problems drafting him at that spot.
I think he's going ADP receiver 5 or 6, which I think that's crazy in my eyes.
Next up, our wide receiver 5. We both have him there. Potentially the best wide receiver in football. Slight bias on my part, and that is Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm cutting you off. It's not even debatable. This podcast is not debatable on who the best receiver in football is. It's Justin Jefferson. We'll see what happens after this year. But I think even with a rookie quarterback and Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson's still going to be fine.
Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb are in the conversation. Jefferson last year played 10 games. He had 100 targets for 68 receptions, 1,074 yards, 5 touchdowns. That came out to 20.2 points per game, finishing as wide receiver 33. His points per game was 5th behind CD, Tyreek, Amon-Ra, and Keenan Allen.
My guy.
So Justin Jefferson, again, we've brought it up. Rookie quarterbacks usually don't sustain wide receiver 1s unless they're true alphas. Justin Jefferson, you can't deny that he's not an alpha. That dude will big dog you every chance he gets. He does everything well. Whether it's J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold, targets are going Justin Jefferson's way. He's going to demand the targets. He's going to get production. It's going to be touchdowns. He's not going to get a bunch of touchdowns, but he's going to make up for that. He's probably going to get well over 100 catches if he stays healthy. He's going to get 1,300 yards is probably his floor, because he's just that much of an impact player. Yeah. Justin Jefferson, don't let the quarterback issue worry you. He's still an alpha. He's a guy you want to target early in drafts. I'm comfortable taking him with CD and Tyreek. They're in the same tier, despite us having them a couple spots apart. I'm comfortable taking, if I would have pick 2, I'd be comfortable taking Justin Jefferson at the second pick of the first round behind Christian McCaffrey.
I would 100% be fine with taking Justin Jefferson as a top 3 to 4 receiver. I'm going to name a list of guys here. Tom Savage, Ryan Mallett, Brandon Whedon, Will Levis, TJ Yates, Brock Osweiler, Brian Hoyer, Case Keenum, Matt Schaub, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. These are 12 guys that have thrown the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is constantly a top 5 receiver in that stretch of times. Those guys are dog shit. I know these people.
Disrespecting Will Levis.
Cool. DeAndre Hopkins at that time in Arizona and Houston was an elite talent. Justin Jefferson, elite talent. Probably better than DeAndre Hopkins was, to be honest. What are we doing here? Those guys in Houston were throwing him the ball were arguably legally blind. They had no idea what they were doing. They weren't quarterbacks. They weren't NFL quarterbacks. Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy are better than them. And that's coming from me.
Oh, not Kyler Murray.
Well, no, not even Deshaun Watson, not yet. Ryan Mallett,
actually
R.I.P. Ryan Mallett. I don't want to disrespect Ryan Mallett. I forgot that guy died. Brandon Schaub, there we go. Matt Schaub, Brandon Whedon. Justin Jefferson's, he's quarterback proof. He's going to go out there.
He is.
I think Darnold's going to start the season. He's going to know what to do with the ball. He's going to get it to Jefferson. God forbid JJ comes in. I don't want him to this year. He's going to know what to do with the ball because he has nothing else to do with it because he doesn't know what to do. He's going to target Jefferson.
Yep. Justin Jefferson was actually putting up better numbers in terms of like yards per route, all that stuff with Josh Dobbs than he was Kirk Cousins. And Josh Dobbs, not a good quarterback.
No, not at all.
He runs around, he makes it work, but he's not effective. But he was getting Justin Jefferson effective targets. And I would say Sam Darnold is a better real life quarterback than Josh Dobbs. J.J. McCarthy has a way bigger ceiling in the offense than Josh Dobbs did. Like Josh Dobbs is a fine backup quarterback, but he came in, he knew what to do, and he ran the offense fine. Really smart guy. The love affair wore off quick. Like you saw Josh Dobbs come in on zero knowledge of the playbook, and they won the Vikings the game, and people fell in love with him. Like, Josh Dobbs, he's the legitimate, he's the real deal.
People came down to earth.
Astronaut. He came down.
See what you did there.
But yeah, Justin Jefferson will be fine.
When you guys went out and traded for Dobbs, you either traded for him or signed him off free agents. I forget what you guys did.
We traded for him.
If you guys would have just traded for Sam Darnold and he had all of last season to learn the books, and then you guys still drafted JJ and Darnold's still your starter this year, I don't even think I'd be worried at all about it because they had the time together to play. And Darnold's had all offseason to learn. I'm not worried about JJ this year. No. Justin Jefferson, that is. I am worried about JJ McCarthy, for sure. Always.
Now, you definitely may be drafting Justin Jefferson at his ceiling. He's currently going as the third wide receiver in ADP, and that's probably his ceiling right now because of the quarterback problem.
Well, yeah, I'm also drafting CeeDee Lamb at his ceiling, but
it's not going to hurt you. Like, Justin Jefferson will still likely finish in the top 12. And points per game, like if he gets hurt, he's still like last year, got hurt. He still put up 20.2 points per game, which was top 5 in the league. Like Justin Jefferson is quarterback proof, like you said. I wouldn't worry too much about him. I think people are. I think in home leagues, especially, people are like, oh, Justin Jefferson's really good, but like they don't have Kirk Cousins anymore. I think Justin Jefferson, you'll see in home leagues, is going to fall closer to the back end of the first round. And that is prime time. Like you shouldn't even think about it. You should be taking him. Don't let the quarterback issue worry you, or the running back change worry you, or TJ Hawkinson not being there worry you. Like, don't let Jordan Addison having almost 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year make you think that like, oh, that guy's going to cut into Justin Jefferson's workload. It's not going to happen. Addison's production was mostly without Jefferson. Jefferson's the guy. Like, he should be going top 5 in home leagues. He should be going top 5 in, pro knowledgeable leagues. Like, he's the real deal, true cut, quarterback proof guy. You know what you're getting with Jefferson. Don't let anything deter you away from him. Not even the hamstring thing. I wouldn't even worry about like that being a issue going forward for him.
No, he's not Julio. Julio struggled with that his whole career, even in college, and it constantly bothered him. You've seen it every year. Julio's hamstring flared up. That doesn't happen in Jefferson. I'm not worried, but hey, man, we're just two guys. If you don't want to listen to us, I'll take him. Let him fall to me in my picks. I'll take Jefferson. I'm not worried.
Yeah. Next up, wide receiver 4, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, played all 17 games, 106 receptions on 158 targets, 1,456 yards, 7 touchdowns. That was 17 points per game. A.J. Brown finished as the wide receiver 5. Another guy, true alpha dude.
Dog.
He does have he's got Devonta Smith with him, but I wouldn't worry too much about Devonta Smith cutting in A.J. Brown's workload. I do like A.J. Brown this year with Kellen Moore coming in. Like, Kellen Moore's had wide receiver 1s, like, and he's produced with 2 guys too. Like, he had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, and both were effective in Dallas under Kellen Moore. I think A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are both going to be effective. I think A.J. Brown is well worth the first round draft stock that he's going right now. He's being drafted, I think, as wide receiver 5 or 6. I think he's going as wide receiver 6. I think he's going ace.
He is. He's going after.
Yeah. But I think the Eagles are going to pass the ball a little bit more. Whether that's going to be effective, we haven't seen Jalen Hurts pass the ball a whole ton, like 600 times in a season. We haven't seen that, so we don't know if Jalen Hurts can sustain that. I'm not overly worried about it. But I think A.J. Brown this year, I think you're going to see similar stats, close to 1,500 yards, 7-8 touchdowns, 100-plus catches. The dude's a dog.
Yeah, these top 6 guys that we're talking about here, you know what you're going to get. I'm not worried about A.J. Brown at all. I went out last year and I traded Smith for A.J. Brown to try to upgrade. He is the upgraded version. It didn't pan out the way I wanted it to, but he is the alpha. He's the one you want. If you can't get A.J. Brown, you settle for Devontae Smith. It's not the other way around. It's you try to get A.J. Brown. If you can't get him, it is what it is. A.J. Brown's the dude. He's a dog. He's the guy you want. He's not going to, if he falls a little bit. He's not going to fall out of the top 8 guys. He's just safe. He's going to succeed in that offense. I love that offense. If I can get him, Smith, Hurts, those are guys I all want. Barkley as well. I'm no Eagles fan, but I'm smart. And those are guys that are going to win you fantasy championships this year. Go out.
A.J. Brown's one of those rare dudes that he can score anytime the ball's in his hand. You can do a dump ball past that dude, and he can take it 80 yards to the house. He's that dangerous, and like he's not afraid to fucking level a dude. Like
but that's what makes him more dangerous. And like Tyreek, he's not like he'll run you back, he'll bull you over. You Derrick Henry. Yeah, he's a freak with the ball in his hand. He's a freak timing the ball out of the air. He's an elite athlete. I love him in Philly, dude. I love watching him. Tennessee had no idea what they were doing down there with him.
Man,
I'm so glad they did not pay him.
Receiver like A.J. Brown.
Man, that would be
Derrick Henry. That'd be wild.
Crazy. Wow. Yeah, they sent him off for dirt, and it wasn't enough. And now look what Philly's doing with A.J. Brown. I love it. I love seeing guys succeed like that. Him and Hurts are an elite combo. If you could snag Brown in the first, Hurts in the third,
that's golden. Good. Yep.
It's golden, dude.
Yeah. There was the issues last year. Like there was a lot of rumblings that like A.J. Brown wasn't happy and like all this stuff was coming out, but like it didn't really seem to affect his play too much. And like I think it's just a gone issue. Like I think A.J. Brown's issue was more play calling, and the Eagles got rid of their offensive coordinator, brought in a new one. Like I think A.J. Brown's going to be happy. I think he's going to produce. Wide receiver 4 in our rankings. Like I'm comfortable with that. Like I don't think you can go wrong with A.J. Brown. Like he is a constant producer in fantasy football. Especially in Philadelphia. I don't think that changes. Like I actually think it opens up for him more, which is a scary thing to think.
I agree. You've seen it a lot last year with even their defense and offense. Both their coordinators, their team didn't vibe with, and it really showed in the back end of the year. They brought in 2 coordinators now, and I think Philly has a good bounce back season. Obviously, they were good last year, but they stumbled a lot in the back end of the year. I don't think that's going to happen.
Round of the playoffs.
They did. I don't think that's going to happen. They might get bounced first round, obviously, but I think they're going to be pretty solid through and through all year.
I don't think there's going to be any drama in terms of the coaching staff and all that stuff this year.
No, I agree. I think it's going to be very settled. They're going to be a well-ran team again this year for sure.
Yep. All right, wide receiver 3. We talked about him already. Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. We both had him at 3 last year, 16 games. Amon-Ra had 119 catches on 164 targets, 1,515 yards, 10 touchdowns. That was 20.7 points per game. He finished as wide receiver 3, which is where we have him. PPR-wise, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the safest option in fantasy football, probably.
That's what it is. We're doing full PPR rankings, so he's a PPR machine. He's a PPR god. He's going to rack in the catches, and they're crazy minor catches, but hey, man, PPR points score. Every time he gets a catch, you just go point, and it is what it is because it's 130 free points almost on the year. Yeah. I love it. I love him with Jared Goff in Detroit. I love that they paid him. I love what Detroit's doing. I love even Jamal, what's his name? Jameson Williams. I'm loving Detroit. Sam Laporta is going a little bit too high for me in redraft leagues, but hey, man, if you feel comfortable enough taking Sam Laporta in the second, pull the trigger. But Amon-Ra, dude, he's safe. He's not going to miss. He's going to get 115 catches, 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's a PPR machine. If we're playing half-point PPR or no PPR, I'm not playing no PPR. But it changes the game a little bit.
He's a top 5 receiver.
He's still top 5, I agree. But I would put Chase and A.J. Brown over him in half point. But full point, I can't. It's too many points to be given up because he's getting all these catches.
Yeah. I've said it before. Third year for a receiver, that's when you see their ceiling, and Amon-Ra is a clear proof of that. Rookie year, 90 catches, 912 yards, 5 touchdowns. Second year, 106 catches, 1,161 yards, 6 touchdowns. There's the breakout. Last year, third year, I said his stats, 119 for 1,515, 10 touchdowns. There's the ceiling. If he gets double-digit touchdowns with almost 120 catches and 1,500 yards, you're golden. Like, he's a guy you think twice about taking. Like, he's so, like, you lock him in your lineup, and, like, if he gets hurt or has a bad year, you're like, hey, look, I banked on one of the safest dudes in fantasy football. It just didn't work out. But I think that is a real slim chance. Like, you shouldn't, like, second-guess picking Amon-Ra St. Brown based on, like, well, maybe that is his ceiling, what he did last year. That's a great ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. If that's his ceiling, I'm happily taking that. It is what it is. And like you said, if he gets hurt, you took a bullet on a guy that's safe and he happened to get hurt. People get hurt. There was that stretch of time McCaffrey missed 2 seasons, but before that he was the RB like 3, and then every season after that he's been like RB 1 or 2.
Keenan Allen, his first 2 years,
guys get hurt.
He had like a stretch where he was always hurt and he got that injury-prone label and no one wanted him, and then he put out 5 years over a 5-year run of a wide receiver 1. Like, Amon-Ra doesn't have an injury history. He's a guy who you're getting probably his floor is 100 catches.
I agree.
His floor in yards is probably 1,200. His floor in touchdowns is probably 6. He's got a good quarterback who produces wide receiver 1s. Jared Goff has done it. There's no one there who's going to really take targets from, like, Sam Laporta, I think, opens it more for Amon-Ra to do more in that offense. If Jameson Williams puts it together and actually produces this year, like, it opens up Detroit in general. Like, Amon-Ra becomes even more dangerous because Jameson Williams can open up the top of the defense. So the defense has to play that, and that opens up the field for Amon-Ra St. Brown to get these 10-yard catches and just move the field. Like, he keeps the offense on the field, which means more opportunities for him. You can't go wrong with a guy like that.
I agree. Detroit's a legit scary team just based off of the levels they can play, where Williams is taking the top off of defense. Laporta's in the middle working up every linebacker and safety, and then Amon-Ra is just running free, dude. And then you got Gibbs and Montgomery coming out of the backfield. Detroit has scary, scary options the way they're going to play football this year. Detroit's going to be fun, and Amon-Ra is super, super safe.
I'd be willing to say Amon-Ra is the safest wide receiver in fantasy football, even over the next 2 guys on the list. Which is a crazy take, but, like, I think there's a world where, like, these 2 guys could, like, just have a bad year. Something could happen. There's so much drama in Dallas.
I mean, I guess there's a chance
Tyreek's probably
CD just doesn't play. Yeah.
But
CD could hold out, I guess. But
I think Amon-Ra is the safest fantasy receiver.
I would still.
Yeah. All right, wide receiver 2 for us, Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins. He's my wide receiver 1. Your wide receiver 2. Last year in 16 games, Tyreek had 119 catches on 171 targets, 1,799 yards and 13 touchdowns. That was 23.5 points per game, finishing as the wide receiver 2. Tyreek Hill is the most dangerous wide receiver in football.
I agree. He is terrifying when you have to play a fantasy team and they have Tyreek Hill on their team, because you're like, okay, well, this guy could drop 60 points. And then what do? You don't do anything, you lose. You take a big fat L because Tyreek Hill just dropped 60 points. He's terrifying. He's a true nightmare matchup machine. He's a guy that's going to go out there and he's terrifying to play against. I've personally never had him in our home league, and it scares me. But, man, I'd love Tyreek Hill. He's super safe in that Miami offense. Him and Waddle are crazy. Tua knows what to do with the ball for Tyreek. And then McDaniel is a great coach, and he knows how to scheme these guys open. Him, Waddle, Achane. He knows how to get these guys, these freak speed athletes, the ball, and they're dangerous with the ball in their hand.
Like, Tyreek's stat line throughout last season: 44.5, 15, 30.7, 10.2, 32.1, 28.3, 25.8, 25.2, 12.5, 30.6, 25.4, 32.3, 10.1, 18.9, 13.6, and then week 18, 21.2. His floor was 10. He did that twice, and then his next lowest was 13. But like you're consistently hearing numbers over 25.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's a great option for sure. I'm a little bit biased because the guy that I have ranked he pretty much won me a championship last year, him and a couple other guys. But you can't go wrong with him or Jefferson or CD. These guys are all guys that are just going to go out there and you know what they're going to do. It's almost pointless to sit. Yeah. Like if you don't know how good, it's on you if you don't know how good Tyreek Hill is.
Tyreek Hill should be going top 3 in every draft. 100%.
The top 3 guys are pretty much set in my eyes.
And the next guy, our wide receiver 1, CeeDee Lamb, should also be going top 3. He's your wide receiver 1, my wide receiver 2. Last season, in 17 games, CeeDee had 135 catches on a leading 181 targets. Also led the league in catches, too. 1,749 yards, 12 touchdowns. That was 23.7 points per game, which finished as the wide receiver 1. Again, this is a dude who just balls out. And, like, he had a slow start. Like, his first 5 weeks, 11.7, 25.3, big week. 10.2, 14.8, 8.9, 18.7. Those aren't really wide receiver 1 numbers. Then the bye week happened, and then this dude went on a 10-game tear.
Yeah.
41, 28.1, 39.5, 16.5, 17.3, 32.6, 19.1, 18.6, 25.2. Championship week, 40.2 points. And then your throwaway, if you're in the shitty league that plays week 18, CeeDee Lamb put up 35.5 points.
I'm telling you right now, I was in the championship week and Dallas played Thursday. I remember this vividly. They played an early game. I literally text the guy that I was playing. I'm like, well, hey, man, you did good. You're not going to win, though, because CD just dropped 40 points, dude. That game was crazy, dude. I loved it. It brought me nothing but joy to watch one of my guys go out there and get 40 points in a championship week. But then it got close. He had Kyron Williams, who came back and dropped 40 points. So it was close in the outcome. But CeeDee Lamb is a true game changer. He's an elite wide receiver. He also has double-digit rushing attempts every year except one. So he's a guy that changes up the game a little bit. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last year and over 100 rushing yards. So that's almost 20 points added. He's not only my wide receiver 1, he's my overall player 1. I have him over Christian McCaffrey points-wise. He's super safe, man. He's the guy. In Dallas, he's going to show up at some point, and him and Dak aren't going to lose a step. He's going to keep going.
Let's put some respect on Dak Prescott's name, though. This dude consistently puts out productive fantasy options with him, whether it be Jake Ferguson or Dalton Schultz, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. Yeah. Dak Prescott is feeding these dudes. Like, he loves his guys. And CeeDee is one of those guys. Like, there's no issue. Like, he's going to get 150 targets. He's going to break 100 catches. He's going to have 1,500 yards if he plays. Like,
exactly.
How much, like, he wants to get paid. So how much is like a minor injury? He's like, I think I'm going to take the week off. Like, I'm playing for the money right now. And he's going to get it even if he sits a few games. Like, that's
he's
the realm
get
where
paid
you
at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Dallas is going to pay him. Like, they're really weird. Like, they wait too long to pay their guys, and then they end up paying them
way too much.
Like, they need to pay Dak as well. Like, Dallas is in such a weird situation. Like, do they pay Dak? I don't know. I don't think they're going to.
Man, just think if they would have just paid Amari Cooper over Zeke, been the situation.
Like, I think they're going to let Dak go after this year. Like something tells me they really want to play Trey Lance. Like, I think that's who they're going in with next year at quarterback. Trey Lance.
I
cheaper.
Think Dallas
they'll have to pick up the 5th year.
I think Dallas makes the playoffs. They might even get a win this year in the playoffs, which is
Dallas always makes the playoffs, though.
I don't think Dak. I think Dak hits the market. I think that Dak hits the market, and I think Dallas ends up paying him the most.
I think Dak Prescott's going to be a Miami Dolphin.
Just swap. Just take Tua and Dallas.
Tua, maybe. Yeah. I don't know if Dallas is going to pay Tua, though. Pay Dak at that point.
100%. I'd much rather Dak than Tua. It's not even comparable.
Trey Lance will be the Dallas Cowboys starting quarterback in 2025.
Cool. As a Giants fan, I hope to God you're right, brother. I hope so, dude.
That's for a different episode. CeeDee Lamb, though, wide receiver 1. Like, I have no problem.
Yes, sir.
Like, I had him at 2. Like, the point differential between him and Tyreek Hill for me was like 2. Not even. Yeah. Like, those guys are both alphas. They're both dogs. They're both It should be them and McCaffrey going first 3 picks of your home leagues, of every league. They should be the first 3 guys off the board.
100%. Those 3 guys are the best options in fantasy this year, being McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
In that order, in my CeeDee,
don't overthink it. If you have one of those first 3 picks, take one of those dudes and just be like, hey, I have a top option at fantasy. And then you can be a little more risky with your second round pick. You can take someone like Devon Achane, who's got way more risk upside because you have such a stable first round pick essentially. But yeah, there you got it. Our wide receiver ones, wide receiver 12 through 1. We had Marvin Harrison at 12, Nico Collins 11, Drake London 10, Chris Olave 9, Puka Nacua 8, Garrett Wilson 7, Jamar Chase 6, Justin Jefferson 5, AJ Brown 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown 3, Tyreek Hill 2, and CeeDee Lamb 1. There you go. Last 2 episodes, we got our top 24 wide receivers. We'll look to do running backs next. We'll see about an episode this coming week. We're recording this on Sunday. Nick's losing all of his wisdom, so who knows how effective he's going to be. So
my wisdom right out of my teeth.
I mean, I guess I could do a solo episode. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how Nick holds up after the wisdom teeth. We might look towards another weekend recording again. Give him a few days on the mend there for him. But there you go. Drafted Up Podcast. Follow us over on Twitter /X at @draftedup_pod. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, search Drafted Up Podcast will show up. Rate, like, review, subscribe. We love it all. Do what you can to support the pod. We appreciate all you guys as always. Thank you. We wouldn't be here for you without you guys. We appreciate everything, the love and support. It means the world. Again, thank you. This is the Drafted Up Podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Adios.
Bye.